when she realized it was her neighbor, a warm-hearted guy she had secretly admired since childhood. When she got home, Juju called out that she was back, but quickly realized her brother still wasn't home. She guessed he was probably out eating with the neighbor and headed straight to the bathroom. Under the hot water running down her body, Juju was still dazed. Recalling the surprise when she saw the neighbor dressed neatly in a suit at university, she silently admitted he had become strangely attractive. Or maybe it was just the suit that made him look so appealing. After finishing her shower, Juju wrapped a towel around her hair and applied some face masks, wondering why her brother still hadn't come home. It was almost dinner time, so she decided to call and ask when he would be back. Celteju was a bit surprised and asked why she cared so much. Juju explained that dinner was ready and she was waiting for him to come home so she could cook. This made Celteju a little annoyed. He replied sharply that he wasn't her personal chef, and if she wanted to eat, she should cook for herself. Juju was about to argue, but Celteju interrupted, suggesting Juju come to the restaurant with them because Gudogin was treating them today, so they could eat as much as they wanted. Hearing this, Juju happily exclaimed she would come right away. A little later, when Juju arrived at the restaurant, she unexpectedly appeared right at the table where they were sitting. Jin frowned and asked why Juju had come all the way here. Celteju casually replied that he couldn't let his troublesome little sister go hungry. Meanwhile, Juju smiled contentedly and quietly greeted the neighbor. He just sighed and said that the two siblings were really just good at freeloading. Celteju didn't care much about the teasing and gently rubbed his sister's back, telling her to feel free to order whatever she liked. Juju immediately called the waiter and began listing the dishes she wanted. He noticed Jin staring at her, tilting his head, and asked if he was looking at her like that because he was worried about the bill. He just smiled, shook his head, and said it was nothing, then sighed and said that in his eyes, Juju was still the same little girl and wondered when she had grown up enough to sit here, drinking wine like this. Juju quickly replied that she was only 3 years younger than him, not such a big age gap. Her gaze briefly lingered on the outfit he was wearing, curious why he was dressed so neatly today. Then Jin took off his suit jacket and explained that he had just attended a relative's wedding. Juju couldn't take her eyes off him as he loosened his tie at his neck. Seeing her focused gaze, Jin softly asked what she thought of the suit. Juju was embarrassed and didn't know how to respond, while Celteju sneered, saying that kind of outfit didn't suit Jin at all. Jin immediately retorted teasingly that Celteju should at least try wearing a decent suit once in his life. When the drinks were brought to the table, Jin sighed and said they should just drink. Then Juju grabbed her glass and took big sips. Jin hurriedly reminded her to slow down, but Celteju raised his glass and boldly declared that tonight everyone had to drink until completely drunk. 3 hours later, the apartment was littered with empty bottles. They had all drunk, to the point where no one could stand. Everyone passed out except the main character who was still awake. Juju was confessing everything, having always been so picky that no one could get close to her. Suddenly, she felt that maybe she had finally found someone who fit the ideal image in her heart. Her hands gently placed on his chest. Just for a moment, she realized she couldn't take her eyes off him anymore. Juju wasn't sure if it was a dream or reality, and even if it was real, she wasn't sure if this scene would ever repeat. She told herself that right now, even if it was just an illusion brought on by the alcohol, no longer matters. The whole world before my eyes has become blurry, reality and illusion blending together. As dawn breaks, harsh sunlight floods the apartment through the window frame. Jin's head aches sharply as if about to explode. In the midst of dizziness, he thinks how suffocating this room is. Maybe Teju accidentally turned on the heater. Instinctively, he feels something pressing down on him, at first thinking it was a big dog. But when he opens his eyes, he sees Juju lying face down on his chest, making every muscle ache. He tries to sit up, his head still spinning, unable to understand anything. Juju, why are you sleeping on me like this? After carefully freeing himself from her, Gudogin adjusts his wrinkled shirt and mutters. He wonders how careless that girl could be, then goes to the next room to wake Celteju, telling him it's time. He reminds them they have class this morning, so Teju and his sister should quickly go home and change. Is Teju also having a headache? He asks why they didn't prepare here since they are neighbors, but Doji insisted on sending them home, saying he still has to clean up the mess from last night. He enters the bathroom while hearing Teju trying to wake Juju, urging that they are late for university class. Then he hears her scream, lamenting that they are too late. Gudogin turns on the shower, letting hot water pour over him, his head feeling like it's about to explode. But what bothers him most is not the pain, but the heavy feeling in his chest. He approaches the mirror, and when he sees his reflection, he freezes. His chest and neck are covered with bruises and bite marks. He can't understand what happened. He looks like he was attacked by a wild beast. Vague memories from his drunkenness begin to flash. A slightly tipsy Juju approaches, her lips brushing his chest, then biting again. Gudogin gradually imagines the image of last night, but realizes what this might mean. Jin puts his hand over his face. His whole body flushes with embarrassment as he mutters in disbelief. What on earth did that girl do to him? After class, Juju staggers, barely able to lift her feet, feeling nauseous and sore all over. She confesses to her friend that she will probably go straight home. Her friend nods and warns her to be careful on the way. Suddenly, Juju receives a message from Dojin. Dojin asks where she is, It's strange because he has never initiated contact like this before. Dojin replies that she is on her way home, but Juju has a bad feeling because Dojin never contacts her like that. Near the school gate, she suddenly recognizes a familiar figure. Gudogin is standing there, his hood pulled low, half his face hidden. Upon seeing her, he calls her name sternly. She is worried. Juju quickly approaches and asks if something is wrong, if it has to do with her brother. But Dojin says Celteju is in class. That makes her even more confused. He seems to want to say something important but clearly looks annoyed. After a few tense seconds of silence, Juju has to ask what exactly he wants from her. Dojin laughs shortly, lowers his hood, points to the bruises on his neck, and asks if she sees them. Juju is stunned. Those marks are really terrible, but she tries to hide her embarrassment, mumbling irritably that she doesn't understand why she has to hear about her best friend's personal life. Her brother laughs, this time with a hint of teasing, saying he didn't expect that she really couldn't remember what she did last night. Juju steps back quickly to deny, insisting she would never do such a thing. But the memory of the hickey on his chest suddenly floods back, making her blush deeply, too embarrassed to speak. Dojin calmly observes, then slowly says, at least now she is trying to remember. He grabs her hand and pulls her along. Just one touch makes Juju's heart race. She feels shy about everything that happened, and even more afraid when realizing Dojin is truly angry with her when they get home. Dojin pulls her so fast that as soon as they take off their shoes, they rush straight into the apartment. Juju stammers, explaining her memory is confused. She hardly remembers anything. He clearly sees the embarrassment in her eyes. Dojin concludes she is not lying. She really doesn't remember. When he grabs the hem of Suju's sweatshirt, her face turns bright red as she panics and asks what he intends to do. Gudogin glances sideways and replies he just wants to help her recall her memory a little. He takes off his shirt, revealing numerous marks on his body. Besides bruises, there is also a very large circular mark. It looks terrifying. Juju screams, half in horror, half in embarrassment, even if just for a moment. She couldn't hide her admiring gaze of his figure, but the shame for what she had caused quickly overwhelmed her. Dojin stood there shirtless with a perfect body, but he was also embarrassed and told her to look clearly. It was all because of her that Juju's body would ache all day. He asked if she knew what she had done. In the end, biting someone was no different than a wild animal, but Juju didn't dare look straight at him. She just bowed her head and kept apologizing. He lifted her chin with a deep voice, wanting her to look straight into his eyes. He asked if she thought a simple apology was enough after all this. Juju was panicked. Her eyes were both dazed and confused, making the apology sound less sincere than she hoped. Dojin calmly remarked that with that expression, the apology didn't sound genuine at all, then frowned and asked further. That's why she was even smiling. Juju was stunned. She had only seen Dojin angry like that once before. Exactly once before. Right before the midterm exam, when Celteju kept teasing his friend, asking when Dojin would finally have the courage to approach the class president to borrow notes. Juju didn't want to hear such boring stories, especially when they blocked her TV view, so she angrily told them to get out. Don't bother me anymore. Back then, Dojin stayed at their house for 2 whole days because he and Celteju were working on a boring project. Juju was annoyed and told both of them to get out, saying they could continue working at Dojin's house. Hearing that, Celteju decided to teach his sister a lesson by teasing her with a wrestling match, but because of insomnia, he was clumsier than usual and accidentally spilled a can of coffee on Dojin's laptop. The problem was that the laptop stored the project both were working on, and when the coffee spilled, the entire device was completely damaged, along with the project they had worked hard on for so long. A wave of anger surrounded Dojin. The 2 siblings were stunned. It was the first time they saw him look so scary despite his calm demeanor. Dojin seemed one step away from exploding. Juju remembered clearly that time Celteju had to beg for a long time before he forgave him. In fact, Dojin was usually very easygoing, and she and her brother were comfortable enough to apologize when needed. So Juju knelt down, clasped her hands, begged continuously, apologized, and swore never to repeat it. She didn't even understand why she acted that way that day. Even when drunk before, she had never done anything so extreme. She believed that seeing her in that situation would soften Dojin and he wouldn't stay mad long. Juju looked up at him and affirmed she would do anything he wanted, but Dojin just stood coldly and told her to stand up. He asked if she was the type to do crazy things whenever she drank. Dojin awkwardly replied no. Dojin sighed softly and said this time he would let it go just because it was her, but warned her never to behave like that with others or she'd bring trouble on herself. Gudogin advised her to be more careful, adding that he wasn't sure if he could trust her like before. Dojin Juju sighed, relieved that he forgave her so easily. She quickly nodded in agreement. Suddenly, Dojin asked what she would do if the same thing happened again. Juju firmly said she would never repeat it, but her eyes once again stopped on his muscular chest, and she thought to herself, maybe she couldn't guarantee it absolutely. Jokingly, she blurted out that if it happened again, she would let him do to her exactly what she did to him. A vein popped on Dojin's face from anger. He shouted, asking if she had completely lost her mind. 2 weeks passed, and Juju almost became Dojin's personal assistant. He's having to do everything he asked. Once again, he was wrong to order her, and though very annoyed, she endured, hoping the situation would be resolved soon. Then Celteju noticed his sister's strange behavior and asked his friend what she had done to make her obey so much. Gudogin, still playing his Nintendo Switch, casually replied he didn't know anything and reminded his friend to pack for the trip. Shortly after, Juju appeared with a gentle smile, asking if she could put a cup of coffee on the table. Then Celteju laughed and said he also wanted a cup of coffee made by his cute little sister. Juju immediately waved her hand and raised her pinky, telling him not to dream about it, just Dojin calling her name softly. Celteju sighed helplessly and gave up, saying she understood his meaning fairly. Most of Dojin's requests only revolved around coffee or a few small errands. For example, she had to wake him up every morning according to the schedule. Juju asked how much longer he planned to make her do this, and Dojin simply replied, until the marks on his chest completely disappear. But by the end of that weekend, curiosity tormented Juju so much that she began to suspect whether Dojin had really recovered or was just pretending to tease her. But Juju didn't have the courage to ask directly, so she decided to verify it herself while he was sleeping. However, as soon as her hand touched the row of buttons on his shirt, he immediately grabbed her wrist and coldly asked what she intended to do. Then Juju screamed in panic, extremely embarrassed for being caught red-handed. She didn't want him to misunderstand, but she also couldn't confess that she only wanted to see if those bruises had disappeared. Not yet. So Juju hastily made up an excuse that she was just about to wake him up because he had asked her to. But Dojin didn't believe it and frowned, asking if she had been drunk this early. Juju was offended by that unreasonable thought and immediately denied it, firmly stating it was not her. She sighed deeply, frustrated because she didn't have enough courage just to ask a simple question, had his chest gotten better, while making coffee. Silently hoping this series of punishments would soon end, Juju happened to overhear a conversation between her brother and Gudogin Celteju. Wondering why Dojin didn't want to study abroad, Juju put down her coffee, turned to Dojin, and asked why he really didn't want to go. After all, he just needed to improve his grades a little to be fine. Unlike her brother who had to spend money to be admitted to SAO, Teju still didn't understand the whole story, and asked her friend why SAO. Juju was so kind to him while being much stricter with her own brother. Dojin looked up, his eyes sparkling briefly behind the screen, then said maybe because he was staying while Celteju was about to leave, leaving his little sister alone. Juju pouted, not understanding why Dojin didn't want to go with his brother. Just 4 weeks was enough for those marks to disappear, and everything would pass. What she didn't realize was that Dojin was quietly watching her from behind the Nintendo screen switch. Juju's figure was plump and round, no doubt about it, which made Dojin flutter, his cheeks slightly flushed, as he still thought this girl was as innocent and clumsy as before. On Friday morning, Juju woke up in the completely empty apartment. Her brother had left early. Suddenly, a sweet fragrance startled her. The scent was so pleasant that Juju wondered where it came from. Since she would have to live alone for the next 4 weeks, she hurried outside, thinking maybe her brother missed his flight and was in the kitchen. But when she entered and heard a noise, she loudly asked if her brother had forgotten his trip today. Then she froze. Before Juju was a familiar figure. Wearing an apron, it was Dojin. That scene stunned her. Almost speechless, she barely stammered a sentence. What was Dojin doing in her apartment? Seeing the tray of baked goods on the table, Dojin repeated the question, wanting to know why he was in her kitchen. But Dojin casually replied that it was late, and if she intended to have breakfast, it was better to go wash her face and change clothes quickly. But Juju couldn't understand why he was preparing breakfast for her. Everything felt like a strange dream. Finally, Juju blurted out that this wasn't the time for things like this, then asked why he was doing that. Had her brother asked him to help out while clearing the table, Dojin calmly answered yes. Celteju had asked him to make sure his little sister didn't go hungry while he was away. He spoke very naturally without any embarrassment. Then, after finishing everything, reminded her to come to the table before the food got cold. But Juju felt extremely awkward. It was the first time the two of them were alone together in one room. Looking at the delicious dishes he had prepared, her mouth watered and she asked if she could eat first and shower later. Jin sighed and asked back why she needed permission. After all, this was her house. She immediately ran to the table and sat down, wanting to confirm if he really would take care of her meals. During the time her brother was away, Dojin sat opposite her and simply replied yes. Juju excitedly asked if he would also be responsible for cleaning up. He smiled slightly and said yes. He would take care of cleaning, but laundry was her responsibility. Juju brightened up upon hearing that because she was used to being spoiled by her brother like that. She sincerely thanked Dojin for breakfast as she tasted the first spoonful of soup. She couldn't believe that delicious taste. Juju thought it was so amazing, she even jumped up and ran to ask whether he really made everything by hand or bought it ready-made from the store. He replied that he cooked it all, telling her to just enjoy it while getting ready for school. Juju kept thinking, even though their two families lived next to each other for a long time, now she couldn't live alone with him. Before she used to call him the annoying neighbor. Back then, they hardly ever talked. There was an awkward distance, but since entering university, they started talking more. Juju slowly put on lipstick, suddenly realizing this was the first time they ate together without her brother. There, remembering the marks she left on Gudogin's body, Juju blushed, trying to pretend nothing happened, but her heart kept pounding wildly when Dojin washed up after breakfast. Juju approached, wondering if he would make her his assistant for the whole 4 weeks. She decided to clarify, immediately called him, but Dojin turned and asked why she hadn't gone to school. Juju almost whispered, saying she had something important to ask whether the marks on his chest had healed yet that night. Dojin turned, wanting to know why she suddenly asked like that. She awkwardly replied that he misunderstood. It was not what he thought at all. He crossed his arms with a mischievous smile, asking if she really just wanted to know if the punishment was over. Then Juju swallowed dryly, continued to insist. Dojin misunderstood, although deep down that was exactly what she wanted to know. When he stepped closer, her heart pounded wildly, suddenly realizing why he was so tall. Dojin, still smiling, asked if she was so curious. Then what exactly did she want? Did she want to see if his chest had healed? But then Juju reached out, pushing him away, saying she was just worried about him not to come so close. But then she realized her palm was resting on his firm chest. Juju panicked quickly, withdrew her hand, blushing hurriedly, explaining that wasn't what she intended. She just wanted to push him a little away. Dojin was so embarrassed he couldn't stand it. She quickly ran out of the apartment, turning back, mumbling thanks for breakfast, and wishing him a good day. Dojin smiled subtly, but right after that he heard Juju's voice. She turned back just to say that tonight she had plans to eat out with friends, so he didn't need to prepare dinner for her. A strange feeling rose in Dojin's heart. He blushed shyly. That gesture was so cute, his heart skipped a beat, and he wondered if this was a normal feeling for a little sister. He was about to return to the sink to wash the last bowl, when he suddenly saw the handbag she left on the table. Then Juju put on her shoes, getting ready to leave when she heard him call. She responded, asking what he wanted. Dojin came over lightly, tapped the bag on her head, reminding her not to be so forgetful. "That's good," Juju gasped. Surprise, then laughed, thanking him suddenly. Dojin wanted to know whether she was just going out with girlfriends or someone else. Juju smiled, confirming that yes, she was meeting her university classmates. Hearing that, Dojin felt somewhat relieved, wished her fun, and told her not to drink too much time. Past the sun gradually set, Juju was happily chatting with friends in a restaurant, holding another glass, when the conversation suddenly shifted. A few girls started gossiping about a new student, praising him as very handsome, and one said she knew his name was SEO Min, tall, attractive, and extremely charming. Others agreed, adding that SEO Min had many followers on social media and had said he wanted to become a personal trainer. A friend whistled at Juju, saying it was ridiculous if she didn't know who they were talking about. But Juju really didn't remember the group, burst out laughing, saying at the last apartment meeting they even saw Seo Hyun Min deliberately sitting next to Juju, so surely he had feelings for her. Juju didn't remember anything, and was annoyed by the constant hints, so she frankly said that no matter what, she wasn't interested in Seo Hyun. A friend commented that Juju was never the type to easily fall just because of looks, then cleverly changed the subject, asking if anyone in the group had ever met Juju's brother in the IT department. She said the last time she saw it, he was so handsome. He stood out more than anyone. Juju sighed in relief when the topic changed, but suddenly, another girl spoke up firmly, saying she was sure he already had a girlfriend. 6. Juju handled the person. 6. They raised their glasses, took another sip, then firmly stated that her brother definitely didn't have a girlfriend. The 6 girls were completely sure of that. The 6 friends sighed in relief, saying that was the reason they couldn't believe the rumors. In the student community, just then a young man approached the group. With an excited look, he said he was very happy to meet the seniors. It was the son of the family they had just been talking about, Shin Seo Min. He smiled brightly at Juju and asked if he could sit next to her. Juju immediately grabbed her beer glass and drank one after another. Under the influence of alcohol, an old memory suddenly came back when she had just entered university and was still getting used to drinking alcohol. Then a small incident happened. The next day, when she walked into class still faintly smelling of alcohol, Juju was surprised by the warm and lively greetings from everyone, but her close friend was resentful. She blamed Juju for always letting things reach her ears through rumors instead of speaking directly. Juju didn't understand and asked confusedly which rumor. Her friend replied that the school was buzzing with rumors that Juju and Kim Suwon were dating, even calling them a perfect couple. Juju was stunned. She had no idea where that rumor came from, because it wasn't true at all. Later, when she got home, Juju told her older brother everything. Then Celteju pressed to know who that guy was. Juju answered that Kim Suwon was a senior in her department and seemed to be the one spreading the rumor that there was something going on between them. Celteju got angry and said if needed, he would teach that guy a lesson. He demanded Juju give him the contact number of that idiot, but Juju replied they hadn't even exchanged phone numbers. This made the rumors even more annoying to her, and she lost patience. Celteju growled, asking if that guy was crazy. He declared that since he had no classes tomorrow, he would go to school with his sister. At that moment, Dojin entered the apartment. He had intended to find Celteju to ask if he had finished his work, but he stopped when he heard the story. Juju tried to soothe him, saying it was okay. She wasn't a child anymore. But Celteju immediately objected, saying his sister was still just a 20-year-old kid. Dojin then intervened, wanting to know what they were arguing about. Celteju explained that he had just found out someone dared to harass his beloved sister, so tomorrow he would go with her to class and wouldn't let that guy get away with it. Juju once again affirmed that he didn't need to interfere because she could handle it herself. She reminded them that she was no longer a little girl. Dojin thought for a moment and then said, honestly, she wasn't wrong. Even so, Juju was already 20 and in university. Maybe Celteju was overreacting. Juju thanked Dojin, She firmly stated she could face this kind of trouble on her own. She turned her back and decisively ended the conversation. Her brother's overprotection sometimes drove her crazy, but what annoyed her more was Dojin's calm and composed attitude. Although she appreciated Celteju's concern, Juju still didn't want him to solve everything for her. She wanted to be seen as a truly mature person. After all, she was no longer a child. Meanwhile, Dojin sat down next to his friend. Celteju felt a bit uneasy and asked if, even though Dojin thought he was overreacting, didn't he think it would be better to intervene immediately before things got worse? Dojin calmly replied that actually Celteju shouldn't say anything to Juju because he also had no classes tomorrow. The two men could handle it themselves, without involving their little sister. Back in the present, looking at the empty glass, Juju's mind was already confused from the alcohol. She suddenly realized she couldn't even remember when that rumor had disappeared. Anyway, she knew she had drunk too much again and her body started to feel uncomfortable. Seung-min looked at her and realized she was no longer as sober as before. A sly smile curved on his lips. A dark intention flashed in his mind. He leaned in as close as possible and deliberately spoke softly. Juju immediately felt uncomfortable being near him. He whispered in her ear that she had left her umbrella in class and he had picked it up. He said it was now at his house and suggested she come get it. Although drunk and foggy-headed, Juju clearly felt she didn't want to be near him at all. She became even more annoyed when she remembered her friend had left her seat, pretending to go to the restroom, giving him the chance to sit next to her. She became even more annoyed when she remembered her friend had left her seat, using the excuse of going to the restroom to give him the chance to sit next to her. Now her friend even seemed to tacitly support this approach, as if she truly believed there was something between Juju and him. But Juju was completely uncomfortable. She couldn't understand why her friend couldn't see the truth. Obviously, she had no interest at all that day when the girls invited each other to play a drinking game called Rabbit and Carrot. Whoever broke the rules had to drink. Juju kept losing several rounds in a row, and the more she drank, the harder it was to continue. After that, Seung-bin sat watching intently. Clearly, she had drunk too much, but for him, this only made the plan easier. Earlier, when mentioning the umbrella and politely inviting her to come by to get Juju, she refused, saying it was okay. Another day, he could bring it to school too, but he still insisted, trying to act gallant, saying it would rain tomorrow. It's better if she comes to get it to avoid getting wet, but Juju firmly replied that it wasn't necessary. She had many umbrellas at home. That answer annoyed Seo-min. The difficulty in approaching and seducing Juju frustrated him to the point he couldn't hide it. When he saw another girl give Juju another glass of alcohol, Seung-bin wondered why she was so cold, why his tricks had no effect. Then Juju held the glass unsteadily. So-hyun offered to drink for her, but she dryly refused, saying she could manage herself. Then she tilted her head back and finished the entire cup of soju in one breath. At that moment, Juju's friend just began to realize that trying to matchmake them was forced. Juju really didn't like So-hyun. The other girls felt the same. One suggested ending the gathering since it was late, and everyone agreed to go home. Hearing that, Seung-bin immediately put his arm around the already drunk Juju, asked her for her address to take her home, but his actions immediately raised suspicion. Although they studied with Chung Sung-min, they were almost strangers. That excessive enthusiasm was really suspicious. So her friend quickly stood up, firmly stating it wasn't necessary because Juju lived nearby. They would call her brother to pick her up. Meanwhile, Dojin was staring intently at his phone, worried because Juju hadn't come home. Near midnight, the phone rang. He answered, asking why Juju was only calling now. But the voice on the other end was a woman who gave the name of a bar, saying Juju was so drunk she couldn't walk and asked him to come pick her up. Dojin immediately jumped up from the sofa. Rushed out so fast he was sweating profusely. When he burst into the bar, he was panting and exhausted. Seeing Juju's group of friends, he sighed in relief. While the other guys stood motionless in the awkward scene, Dojin's eyes met Seo-min's. Clearly, he wasn't happy to see Dojin appear. But what angered Dojin even more was the image of Juju slumped down, sitting next to Seo-min, with his arm around her. The fire of anger flared up inside him. He gritted his teeth, wondering what the hell had happened. Dojin's cold gaze made Seung-min immediately pull his hand away from Juju. He knelt before Juju, trying to understand why she was in such a bad state. She couldn't even open her eyes. He shook and called her, but she didn't respond, knowing Juju had completely lost consciousness. Dojin bent down and lifted her onto his back as if she weighed nothing. Her friend hurriedly handed Dojin Juju's handbag, thanked him again for coming to pick her up. Following Dojin's steps silently, she watched him carry Juju out of the bar. At that moment, Seung-min quietly approached, murmuring in a low voice that Juju's brother looked really scary. But her friend shook her head and replied that he wasn't Juju's brother. She explained that Juju's brother had gone abroad for short-term study, and currently, that friend was the one taking care of her. The boy was surprised and asked, "Isn't it too risky to let her leave with another man?" The friend thought he was actually the suspicious and much more dangerous one. She replied that those two had known each other since childhood, almost like family. Despite everything, the guy still looked at them as if he couldn't accept a man and a woman could only be friends. Finally, everyone said goodbye and went home separately. When they arrived at the apartment, Dojin placed Juju, still drunk on the bed, and carefully covered her with a blanket. He was silent, thinking, blaming her for being careless. How could she act so recklessly? Then he recalled the boy from the group earlier. The anger flared up again, wondering if Juju understood what might have happened. He was frustrated by her irresponsibility. Nevertheless, everything ended smoothly. He straightened the blanket neatly so she could rest and decided to talk clearly in the morning. When he closed the door, Dojin sighed, wondering since when Juju had grown up so much. She was so easy to deal with before. Now he worried about her habit of drinking too much and her actions afterward. Then Dojin suddenly remembered a time when Juju was truly terrified as a child, waking up in the middle of the night because of a noise. She thought it was her father, so she went out to ask why he was still awake, but in reality, it was a filthy thief. Evil had sneaked into her apartment. She was very scared and started trembling uncontrollably. Afraid of being discovered, he hurt her. That memory haunted Dojin so much that even as an adult, Juju still trembled whenever she had to stay home alone at night. Back then, Dojin was just a boy. He only heard that the police came to the building because of a theft but didn't know the details until recently before the trip. Celteju told him that Juju was injured that night. Only then did Dojin understand why her brother was so protective of his sister and insisted she not spend the night alone. Now that Celteju was absent, Dojin had to sleep in the living room to ensure her safety. Juju tossed and turned restlessly. Suddenly sitting up, she was hit by a severe dizziness that knocked her down. After a few seconds, she realized where she was and staggered out of the room. Holding her head, the pain was like a hammer pounding inside. She desperately wanted a glass of water, but when she reached the living room, she was shocked to see an unexpected scene. First, Dojin was lying on the sofa, his firm chest shining under the dim light, as if glowing. Her saliva started dripping like a cat seeing fat. Unsure if she was dreaming or awake, she slowly approached, drawn in. Juju told herself this must be a dream. Like a wild animal unable to resist a tasty prey, her eyes didn't leave that muscular chest, and believing it was just an illusion, she thought it wouldn't cause any consequences. So Juju gently climbed onto him, letting herself drown in the fantasy. Meanwhile, Dojin was still sound asleep, dreaming of a mosquito shaped like Juju biting him non-stop. The next morning he felt something heavy pressing on his chest as if someone was lying on top of him. Opening his eyes wide, he saw Juju sleeping soundly on him. He annoyed, thinking she was up to mischief again because there were new marks on his body once more. Juju drove him crazy and he started yelling, demanding she wake up immediately, hearing the shouting faintly. Juju drowsily opened her eyes, still dazed, asking what happened. After a few seconds, her vision cleared and she immediately recognized Dojin's angry face. In that moment, she was horrified, realizing what she had just done. Juju was stunned, frozen, although she had sworn before never to let this happen again. Juju had been drunk and once again messed everything up. A while later, while showering, she anxiously thought about what to do now. Her heart was filled with shame because of her own actions. She had believed it was all just a dream, but the moment she saw his chest, she completely lost control. At that moment, she remembered the agreement they had made. If it happened again, Dojin would have the right to do to her exactly what she had done to him. Just after showering, she pictured him behind her, whispering into her hand. Just imagining that possibility, he made her heart pound wildly. But strangely, a part of her seemed to look forward to it. Just thinking about it excited her, and that feeling scared her. Juju didn't understand why she reacted that way. Dojin was like a brother to her. She was confused about how to face him after everything. After showering, sitting in the living room, Juju hung her head, fidgeting nervously with her fingers. It was clear he was really upset with her. She knelt before him. His sharp gaze and the long silence made her even more anxious. After a while, Dojin poured tea for both of them, sat opposite her, and asked if she understood what consequences her drinking habit could lead to. Juju hurriedly defended herself, saying she usually didn't drink that much. She even tried to look apologetic to move him. She explained. This was the first time in her life she got that drunk, and actually she didn't like alcohol. Dojin, clearly still annoyed, sighed again and asked directly if she had ever done anything similar with anyone else. Juju immediately replied no. This was the first time in her life. That answer made Dojin even more confused. He asked what on earth had happened and why she behaved so strangely. Was there some weird fetish? In response to her silence, he said he was thinking about taking her to see a doctor. Psychologically, biting someone's chest couldn't be considered normal. Juju blushed deeply from embarrassment. But knowing she had to give a reasonable explanation, she clenched her fist tightly and began talking about her favorite actor. That person had a broad, muscular, and beautiful chest. It was because of Gudogin that she identified her ideal type. A man with a firm chest. Dojin crossed his arms and asked sharply, "So does that mean any broad chest can make you fall for someone?" Juju immediately shook her head to deny it, saying it wasn't like that. Then she passionately explained that it's not just the size, but also the muscular shape. The feeling when looking at it all blends into a perfect whole. So she admitted that when she looked at him, she realized he was the most suitable person in that aspect. Suddenly noticing Dojin's judging gaze following her, Dojin blushed, lowered his head, and apologized again, saying she had gone too far. Dojin stood up and sighed deeply. Although she spoke sincerely, he still decided she needed to learn a lesson. Placing his hand on the hem of her sweatshirt, he began to lift it up. Juju's eyes widened in surprise, not understanding what he intended to do, his gaze serious. Dojin said he wasn't joking, and reminded her that they had an agreement. If it happened again, he would respond exactly as she had done. Juju couldn't believe he was taking it so seriously. But Dojin kept a firm gaze, reminding her that she had promised and now had to keep her word. The truth was, he didn't intend to actually do it. He just wanted to scare her a little. The way she behaved worried him, and he wanted her to understand that she couldn't keep acting like that, especially with strangers, or sooner or later she would get into big trouble. But suddenly, Dojin's eyes widened at something completely unexpected. Then Juju gently pulled her sweatshirt hem and took it off completely. Dojin froze, unable to believe what he was seeing. He had thought she would just apologize like before, but Juju's action was completely unpredictable. He was so embarrassed he couldn't move. Only one thought flashed through his mind. This girl must have lost her mind. Dojin knelt before her, and although inside he kept shouting that this was wrong, he couldn't stop himself as if enchanted. He leaned in close and gently touched her neck, leaving a mark just like she had left on him. For a moment, a thought passed through Dojin's mind. Why? Dojin, the girl who barely ever paid attention to him before, was now acting so differently. The image he had of her made him secretly hope he would be the only one to see her like this. But immediately after, he was startled and horrified, realizing what he had just done. What surprised him was that Juju didn't show any fear. Instead, she sternly scolded him, saying he had crossed the line. Dojin laughed and admitted she was right. Dojin stood up to put his shirt back on, but Juju's eyes couldn't leave him. A heavy silence fell until the next moment he turned back toward her. Without thinking, he pulled Juju into his arms tightly and kissed her. In that instant, a fleeting thought crossed Juju's mind. They were stepping into a risky situation. Dojin smiled mischievously, but his words were sincere. She was truly beautiful, and what had to happen, happened. Both had crossed the line and enjoyed the blossoming emotions together. If anyone wants to see more details, just read the story. I can only tell you up to here. After a while, after the climax, Juju peacefully leaned against Dojin's chest and gently fell asleep, while Dojin suddenly realized he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. And finally, he understood his true feelings for her. For some reason, old memories suddenly flooded back. That day at school, there was a girl hiding in the corner of the hallway, crying bitterly. He knew the reason clearly. She had just failed the final exam. Dojin quietly stood nearby, watching everything, ready to help if she needed it. But at that time, he just thought the neighbor girl was really silly. That day, Juju returned home with a calmer expression, tearfully entering and loudly calling to her brother that she was home. Immediately, Celteju asked where her friend was. Juju was surprised by the question and replied, "Why? Shouldn't I know where Dojin is?" Suddenly, a bag dropped on her head, making her scream in shock. Turning around, she angrily questioned him, "Why did you do that?" Dojin calmly answered, emphasizing that he was older than her and she shouldn't speak rudely like that. Then he handed her the bag. Turning toward the door, he urged Celteju to hurry because they had an appointment at the internet cafe. After that, Juju held the bag with a suspicious look. When she opened it, she was amazed to see it full of candy and snacks. Clearly, Dojin had bought all of it for her, but Juju couldn't understand why. Celteju saw her sister intently looking at the candy and asked her friend why Dojin bought candy for Juju. Dojin just casually replied that there was no reason at all. Gudogin only now realizes the true feelings that he has liked her for a very long time. He watches her while she sleeps, gently raising his hand to hold the face of the small girl who has now become a beautiful angel-like young lady. Instead of continuing to hide or comfort her with sweets, Dojin decides that it's time to open his heart. Outside, the night has fallen with a bright full moon. Suddenly, Dudu wakes up abruptly, eyes wide in confusion for a few seconds, trying to figure out where she is, what happened, and when memories flood back, realizing what she and Dojin just did, she jumps up in horror at that memory. Clearly both lost control for a moment. Immediately after, Juju suddenly realizes she is wearing his t-shirt. It's soft and carries a faint, pleasant scent. Just thinking about Dojin putting it on her while she was asleep was enough to make her face flush. Sneaking a glance toward the kitchen, Juju sees him standing in front of the stove. She doesn't know how to behave after what just happened and can't guess how he will face her. However, the aroma spreads throughout the kitchen, making her stomach growl. He cooks like a professional chef, and Juju can't resist the sudden hunger. Dojin turns around after hearing a small noise behind him. He smiles and says she is awake. Juju doesn't know what to expect and is even more surprised to see him so gentle. She holds back as he approaches the table, his hand gently wrapping around her waist, pulling her closer. Then he places a light kiss on her forehead. Dojin softly says they can sit down and have dinner together. She stammers a reply, "That's okay." Then she sits at the table while he arranges the food. All unfamiliar and very different from any situation she has ever experienced. He behaves as if they are a couple. When Dojin sits opposite Juju, she quickly says thank you for the meal. She feels so uncomfortable that if not for the tempting aroma of the food, she might have found an excuse to run away. Dojin still smiles and advises her not to drink alcohol outside anymore. Hearing that, Juju can't stop thinking about the kiss he placed on her forehead and the way he treats her. Everything is so unusual, to the point she decides to clarify immediately. She nervously asks hastily, "The thing that happened between them was just a moment, just a one-night thing, right?" Dojin smiles mischievously, replying with another question. He wants to know exactly what she means because, after all, they've been through. Obviously, they will start dating. Juju is stunned, the spoon still frozen mid-air, unable to immediately process what she just heard. It's hard to arrange a sentence in her head where she and he are paired with the word dating. She shakily asks if it's strange, since for the past 15 years, she has always considered him like a brother. Not to mention she worries about what Celteju will think. Dojin, however, shows no doubt or embarrassment. He replies naturally that there is nothing wrong since they are not blood-related, so why can't they date? As for Celteju, just be honest about everything. Juju silently looks at him, then realizes he's right, and that's what she likes most about this idea. Actually, if they really dated, those breasts would completely belong to her, but then Juju quickly lowers her head, hiding her face in her hands, recalling the only reason she hesitates with Gudogin is that he is extremely jealous. There was a time Celteju and Dojin were drinking at a restaurant. Under the influence of alcohol, Dojin blurted out that he would do anything for his girlfriend. Then Celteju asked if after all efforts the girl still betrayed him, then what? Dojin immediately replied that he would do everything to make sure that never happens. When both brothers questioned, what does everything mean? He bluntly said he would cut off all connections the girl has with other men. At that moment, Celteju and Juju glanced at each other and silently concluded he was really too crazy. Celteju was curious and asked if so. Then Dojin would stop talking to all the women around him. Without hesitation, Dojin replied that he would do that he would block them all. No argument. Juju nervously raised the glass to her lips and drank continuously. While listening to her brother argue fiercely with his friend, Celteju insisted that Dojin could never separate his girlfriend from the whole world, because Celteju said she still has to go out to work, but Dojin countered that it was completely unnecessary. Hearing that, Celteju exploded in anger, asking if Dojin intended to lock that poor girl in the apartment, or what. Meanwhile, Juju recalled she once wondered why a handsome guy like Dojin didn't have a girlfriend. Now she understands all too well. Although his calm appearance is very attractive, he is overly possessive of me, Juju. I always thought he couldn't maintain any relationship, and now I'm stunned to realize I've become his girlfriend. Dojin smiled brightly, wanting to know what she was thinking so intently, then said it's best to eat before the food gets cold. But Juju thought the idea that he wanted to date her out of genuine feelings was absurd. A more reasonable scenario is that he just wants to take responsibility for what happened between them. So she bluntly asked if it wasn't strange to start a relationship just for that reason. Because neither of them had deep feelings yet, it would be more reasonable to date a few times, to get to know each other better, and then decide if it's worth continuing or not. Deep down, Juju believed that sooner or later Dojin would realize they weren't a suitable couple. Dojin's face suddenly turned serious. His voice was calm but firm as he asked if she really thought love was a game, and wanted to know if she was joking with him. He gently held her hand, intertwining his fingers with a tender strength, sending a shiver through Juju's body. She looked up at him in surprise. Then Dojin lifted her hand to his lips and placed a light kiss before saying that, after all, she was the one who had taken the initiative to get close to him first, so she must take responsibility for what would happen. Later, standing in the bathroom, Juju stared at the marks on her arm. She thought Dojin wasn't a dog, but looking at her arm, it seemed like she had just been bitten by a rabid dog. Her whole body was covered with marks to the point she didn't know what to wear to cover them. In front of the mirror, she muttered to herself. She recalled Dojin telling her to take responsibility and wondered if love really worked that way. But earlier, when she pulled her hand back, she had said herself that if he insisted, she would take that responsibility. Dojin was satisfied then, smiling and saying that was exactly what he wanted to hear. Juju's flushed face continued eating. She found him really strange but suddenly realized something unusual that made her blush even more. She panicked and asked what he was doing, realizing it was his leg under the table. Dojin was deliberately sliding his leg against hers, a half-joking, half-provocative smile on his lips. Then he lightly pulled his collar to reveal his collarbone. He teased her, saying since she agreed to take responsibility, he wanted to know if she was interested in exploring the chest she had always admired. Seeing that, Juju even dropped her spoon. Her heart surged with a feeling that was half funny, half excited. Back to the present, she bitterly realized she had been defeated by her own weakness. If not for being fascinated by that damn chest, she wouldn't have fallen so easily. Just then, she felt his arm wrap gently around her waist. Dojin stood right behind her, holding her gently, asking why she was so late. Then his lips pressed softly against the back of her neck. Leaving a gentle kiss, a shiver ran down her body like an electric shock. Juju even liked that feeling. But everything was still too new and embarrassing, so she didn't know how to react and called him a pervert. She told him to stop that behavior immediately, repeating the word pervert as she leaned against the sink with a sharp look. She sarcastically said to look at all the marks he had left on her body. Dojin replied sarcastically that he couldn't believe she was the one saying that. He lifted his t-shirt to reveal the many marks on his chest and neck, then asserted that the real pervert between them was her. Just look at the artwork she had left on him to see it clearly. Juju blushed and quickly pulled his shirt down, remembering they both had classes today, so she suggested going to university together. She reminded him not to try to seduce her anymore. Dojin just smirked and said he knew exactly what he was doing. If he kept going like this, she would soon be madly in love with him. But before Juju could say anything, he suddenly kissed her. Meanwhile, Juju thought that because of him, she wouldn't be able to sleep tonight and would definitely be late for class. The next morning, miraculously, Juju still arrived at school on time. She sat down, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept wondering if Dojin could concentrate in class after everything that had happened. Yesterday, he only paid attention to her. But today, surprisingly, he looked calm, almost pensive. Juju texted him asking if he was in class yet. He replied he was, and said his class would end at 5:10 p.m. Juju messaged back that her class also ended at that exact time, so he suggested they have dinner together. He told her not to leave early, but to wait for him and go home together. Juju smiled at the phone screen, thinking the emoji he used really suited him. She realized she was acting like a silly girl who was infatuated, and when she suddenly realized that a natural smile appeared on her lips again, she turned her eyes back to the computer screen. Juju began to wonder if Dojin was always this cute. The class ended earlier than expected, but she still decided to wait for him as promised. When she walked down the hallway, she passed by two girls and accidentally overheard part of their conversation. They were gossiping about a cherry-flavored lip balm that could make kisses sweeter, or so they said. There was even a popular challenge trend where you apply different flavors of lip balm and have your boyfriend guess the scent. Juju paused, finding the idea quite interesting. She started searching in her bag as if looking for a treasure. Finally, she found her lip balm, strawberry-flavored. Juju gently applied it to her lips, telling herself it didn't mean anything, just simply because her lips were dry. Then she quickened her pace. Her mind only wanted to get to Dojin's room to prepare a small surprise for him, but she didn't realize there was a boy walking the opposite way. It was Shin Seung-min. As soon as he saw her, he recognized her immediately and called out Juju's name. Because she didn't stop, Seung-min gently grabbed her sleeve to get her attention. He smiled and asked where she was rushing off to. Juju immediately jerked her hand back as if she had touched something hot. Then she angrily asked what he thought he was doing. Seung-min quickly raised his hand to apologize, saying he didn't mean to scare her. He was just happy to see her again. But Juju looked at him suspiciously. Seung-min's overly familiar attitude made her uncomfortable, especially since they weren't that close. So she pressed him, and asking why he called her like that. He replied that he just wanted to know if she got home safely that day. He explained that he didn't have her number, so he couldn't contact her to check. Then he asked if Juju could give him her phone number. Juju was annoyed by the situation. She didn't want any misunderstandings, but clearly it felt like he was deliberately flirting with her, and that was something she absolutely had no intention of encouraging. So she coldly replied that she wasn't interested, and besides, she already had a boyfriend. Seung-min was very surprised, but didn't give up. He insisted that he heard she was still single. Juju firmly answered that things were different now. At that moment, Dojin appeared behind her and called her name. Juju's heart immediately fluttered. She was happy to see him there. Seung-min threw Dojin a contemptuous look, clearly annoyed that he was interrupting again. Meanwhile, Dojin exuded a threatening aura but tried to stay calm, speaking gently and asking Juju what she was doing here. Juju ran straight to her boyfriend so fast that So-hyun didn't have time to react. She smiled at Dojin and said it was time to go. Dojin gave Seung-min a warning look, clearly not liking to see that guy lingering nearby. Juju and Seung-min also exchanged scrutinizing looks. Then Dojin deliberately smiled lightly, wrapped his arm around her waist, and said it really was time to go. The two turned their backs and left, walking side by side, arms around each other, leaving Seung-min standing rooted. Watching them, he adjusted the brim of his cap, feeling confused inside. Clearly, she once said Dojin was like family, but now everything was completely different. In the car, Juju buckled her seatbelt and heard Dojin quietly comment in a slightly jealous tone that she obviously had many guys interested in her. Juju was startled and quickly denied it wasn't true, but Dojin looked straight into her eyes, affirming that it was true. She was very beautiful, and many men had noticed that. Juju felt uncomfortable, thinking silently that she had hit the wall called possessiveness. Even now, she still found it hard to accept and believed it was all because of So-hyun that she worried Dojin would completely lose control and become jealous. But unexpectedly, she felt his fingers quietly intertwine with hers gently and warmly, soothing the unease in her heart. She half-jokingly asked if he was jealous. Dojin finally admitted that he was insanely jealous. At first, Juju took a few seconds to digest that confession, and surprisingly, she felt a strange joy in her heart. She laughed softly and said she found this funny. She had never seen her neighbor like this before. Dojin felt a little hurt and asked what was so strange about it. Isn't it normal to be jealous when someone else flirts with your girlfriend? Juju explained that it was strange to her because they hadn't officially started dating yet, and he was already jealous. Moreover, after so many years of being neighbors, nothing like this had ever happened, and now they had become lovers. This was really strange to her, so Dojin smiled mischievously and said that she had no idea. He had been jealous of her for a long time. Juju was stunned by that revelation, her heart pounding rapidly. Her eyes wide open, she exclaimed, asking if he meant he had liked her for a long time. Dojin lowered his eyes and admitted that yes, he had tried to ignore those feelings and even lied to himself, but that was exactly how he felt. Juju shouted in surprise, unable to believe what she just heard. He frankly admitted that he loved her. A happiness mixed with excitement surged in Juju's chest. She began asking questions rapidly, almost out of breath. She asked when he realized those feelings. She confessed that she had never thought he had feelings for her because, in her mind, he only asked her out because he felt guilty about what had happened between them. Dojin honestly admitted that he had liked her since high school and added that this had nothing to do with responsibility. If it were just about responsibility, he would never have gotten involved with his best friend's sister. Moving closer, he clarified that from the start, he had his own reasons for wanting to be by her side. Then he kissed Juju gently, causing a warm, sweet wave to rise in her chest. It was hard to believe all of this was really happening. He had never shown his feelings so clearly before. Thinking about the guy who teased her for 2 weeks, just because she bit his chest, it turned out he had secretly liked her for a long time. Juju stepped back slightly, squinting suspiciously. She asked if he really wanted her to believe all those words since until recently, he still made her brew coffee, wake him up every morning, and even took care of various chores. Dojin admitted that before, he thought she only did those things because she was drunk, and that maybe she was the type of girl who acted impulsively and on a whim. Dojin said he was surprised to realize she was genuinely interested in him and it wasn't just a joke. Then he took her hand and said that now she could touch or bite his chest as much as she wanted, the place she had secretly admired for so long. When her hand rested on his chest, Juju suddenly asked if he had ever heard about the lip balm challenge. He answered no and was curious to know what it was. She explained that she heard some girls in the hallway talking about a challenge where you apply flavored lip balm and your boyfriend has to guess the flavor. Then she asked if he wanted to try. Dojin was silent for a moment, then softly told her to fasten her seatbelt. After that, they went to watch a movie, and Juju felt a bit strange. That made her realize clearly that this was indeed a date. Dojin said he had bought exactly the combo she liked the most: half salty, half caramel popcorn, and a can of Coca-Cola. Juju smiled and thanked him, and he explained that he chose the early screening so they wouldn't miss their reservation at the restaurant. She replied that was fine. Juju took a sip of water and glanced at Dojin's hands, thinking that since it was a date, maybe they should hold hands. Suddenly, she heard his voice and was startled, thinking he was reading her mind. Unexpectedly, Dojin put his hand over his chest, shyly telling her not to touch him in public. Juju was stunned and turned away, asking what kind of person he thought she was. He laughed and asked what was wrong with her. He said she was so beautiful that it made his heart race. Juju annoyedly snapped at him to hurry up and, preferably, keep quiet. Soon, they were sitting inside the movie theater. Dojin sighed, chewing each piece of popcorn, saying the romantic movie was really boring. She thought they should have chosen a thrilling, exciting movie instead. The story of the two main characters was much more interesting. Surprisingly, Dojin was completely drawn into the movie despite that. Juju sighed again. She decided at least to enjoy her favorite popcorn. She reached into the buttered popcorn bucket, but her hand slipped and accidentally landed on that spot. That morning, Dojin felt her hand while Juju was clueless, thinking, "What's with this weird popcorn?" Dojin chuckled softly and asked what she was doing. Juju, flustered, apologized, saying she grabbed the wrong thing. When she realized what her hand was holding wasn't small at all, Juju silently thought that the eggplant in real life was even bigger than she thought. At that moment, Dojin held her hand and quietly said that if she wanted, they could leave the theater early to sit together in the car where she could be comfortable. Juju looked at him for a few seconds, shy, but she didn't want to rush, so she softly replied that she wanted to watch the entire movie, then withdrew her hand and focused back on the screen in front of her. At that moment on the screen was a climax scene between the two main characters. The girl was jealous of her boyfriend and demanded that he prove his love. Juju pretended to be interested, but inside, she found the story strange and uncomfortable because it reminded her of a recent conversation with Dojin. When he confessed he was jealous of her, she curled up on the chair, wondering if it would be better to agree to go out with him, and silently wondered if he was angry with her now. Meanwhile, Dojin wasn't paying much attention to the movie. His thoughts were about Juju. He quietly observed and realized she seemed glued to the screen, which made him even more embarrassed about his earlier proposal. Maybe now she just wanted to focus on the movie. He worried if he had upset her or made her wary because of his haste. The night gradually came to an end, and on the way home they stopped by a convenience store. Then Juju suddenly excitedly suggested buying a few cans of beer, which surprised Dojin because they had already eaten quite a lot before, and he thought he couldn't drink anymore. But Juju happily ran ahead, saying she would get some snacks she liked. He told her not to run or she might fall. But when Juju reached the fridge counter, her smile suddenly disappeared. She started feeling tense and uncomfortable. All evening, she had only accidentally touched him once. But even after the movie, she realized Dojin was still trying to hold back. Starting from dinner at the restaurant, Juju clearly saw how tense he was, and that made her even more flustered. Now even in the store, she could still feel the after effect of the impulsive gesture she had caused. She tried to keep a bright expression, pretending not to notice anything, but it was getting harder, which made Juju scared. She wanted to understand how he could keep that restraint for so long. After getting the snacks and beer, she stepped out to the checkout counter where Dojin was waiting. In her mind, Juju concluded he must be a pervert. Despite thinking hard, she couldn't find any other explanation. Just as Dojin was paying, Juju suddenly opened her eyes wide in surprise. She looked through the glass and called him over to see it had started raining, and it wasn't just drizzle. Gently, she put her hand out into the heavy raindrops falling onto her palm. Dojin offered to buy an umbrella, but Juju said no need because their house was nearby. However, after thinking for a moment, She suddenly remembered the sweatshirt she left in his car, and hesitated that maybe they should buy an umbrella after all. When she looked back, Juju immediately blushed deeply and shouted, asking what he was doing right in the convenience store as Dojin was taking off his jacket. She was extremely embarrassed, and sharply asked why he was doing that here, taking off his own jacket. But Dojin didn't answer, silently putting the jacket on her. Juju was speechless. His jacket was oversized but warm, and carried his familiar scent. It wrapped around her comfortably. He pulled the hood over her head and gently said she would catch a cold if she got wet in the rain. Then he put his arm around her shoulder, smiling, and said it was time to go. Juju dazedly followed silently. Her heart full of emotion, she didn't expect Dojin could be so gentle. The young store clerk, watching the two of them walk away, he suddenly felt sad because clearly they were a beautiful couple. But also a slight jealousy arose. Loneliness crept into the sales clerk like me writing this story. Maybe I'll never find a girlfriend in my life. Sobbing sadly. Their house was just across the street. But the rain grew heavier. Inside the building, Juju sighed in relief, realizing thanks to Dojin's jacket her hair was still dry. She happily thanked him, but then heard his voice asking why she was still trembling. Was it because she was cold? She replied maybe a little, then looked at him silently. Unlike her, Dojin was soaked all over, the white t-shirt clinging to his body, and when he ran his hand through his wet hair, droplets flew sparkling. The scene was so captivating, Juju couldn't look away. Suddenly Dojin covered himself and scolded her for looking at him like a pervert. Juju blushed deeply and quickly denied it wasn't like that, but then shyly asked if it was really that obvious. Dojin smiled slightly, his cheeks also flushed. Saying no, in the elevator, Juju suggested they go straight to the apartment so he could dry off. Just as the door closed behind them, shoes and clothes fell scattered on the floor. Dojin kissed her sweetly, his hand holding the back of her head while she stammered, telling him he should take off the soaking wet t-shirt. Finally, he put his hand around her waist and pulled the wet shirt tightly against her skin. Catching Dojin's focused gaze, he leaned in with a provocative smile, telling her she could touch him as much as she wanted. The girl gently placed her hand on his shoulder, and both were swept away by their rising emotions. Right in the hallway, Dojin let the last pieces of fabric fall to the floor, then guided Juju's hand to touch him. She hesitated, worried if it was okay. He softly replied that the only way to know was to try. Juju realized she had been waiting for this for a long time, then on tiptoe whispered for him to be gentle. Shortly after, she sighed softly, complaining it was uncomfortable. Dojin hurriedly comforted her to relax, and soon Juju melted in his embrace. He sobbed, saying she couldn't take it anymore. And after a while, both lay in the bathtub. Juju irritably complained that her legs were aching because of him. Dojin apologized, but his satisfied expression clearly showed he had no regrets. He even offered to massage her, but Juju firmly refused, telling him not to start anything again. While brushing his teeth, Dojin glanced teasingly, saying she looked like she was about to faint. He reminded her not to forget to brush, and asked if she needed him to get her a toothbrush. Juju sighed, complaining she was exhausted because of him. And this time, it was actually him helping Dojin. In her heart, she kept wondering where he got all that energy, and whether he really liked her that much. Hearing her say she needed help, Dojin immediately excitedly asked again if he could really help. Juju snapped that he was thinking dirty thoughts again. Didn't he? As he gently lifted her chin. Juju was startled, thinking he wanted to start again, but Dojin softly said he just wanted to help her get ready for bed. She stared at him in disbelief, unable to believe this was really happening. Could it be that he loved her so much? That he wanted to brush her teeth and help her to bed? Dojin smiled kindly, like soothing a child, bringing the toothbrush close to her mouth, gently telling her to open her mouth. But when he saw her flushed face and shy eyes, he stopped and asked if she was okay, then remarked she looked like she had a fever. Juju quickly replied it was just from soaking in hot water too long, and urged him to hurry up. The next day, Juju felt much better. Finishing her lessons, she was putting away her books when someone called her name. Turning around, Juju saw her close friend, who was hoping the female lead had no plans today. Her friend invited her to go have a drink and chat for a bit. Juju hesitated, saying she was afraid it wouldn't be convenient. Her friend sadly said that lately, Juju was always stuck to her boyfriend. Juju quickly apologized and promised to make it up to her another time, but her friend still insisted, saying it had been a long time since they went out or talked, and she was going crazy wanting to know how Juju was doing. So that's why, Juju suddenly thought, there really wasn't much to tell after all. These past few days, she and Dojin had barely left the bed. Then she remembered the promise she made to her boyfriend not to drink outside anymore. So Juju told her friend she couldn't go, using the excuse that her parents were visiting. Hearing that, her friend stopped being angry and said since she would become the future wife of Celteju, she could send greetings to her future in-laws for her. As soon as the conversation ended, Juju dashed down the stairs, running late. She hurried out to meet Dojin, who was already waiting in the car, when suddenly someone grabbed her jacket hard, almost making her fall. Juju froze, staggered to keep her balance, confused why someone would grab a person running like that. Fear briefly surged when she turned around and held the person. It was Sungmin, who appeared out of nowhere. As if he had the right to act that way, his face flushed and breathing heavily. Seungmin quickly asked if she could give him a moment, saying he needed to talk urgently. His expression sincere, worried to the point Juju was surprised. She decided to listen and asked what he wanted to say. The young man was really tense. He accepted that Juju felt uncomfortable being near him and had intended to keep his distance, especially after she said she had a boyfriend. But after witnessing a scene that made him uneasy, he couldn't stay silent anymore. Seungmin said that a few days ago, while passing through the parking lot and smoking, he heard a girl's scream and immediately recognized the voice as Juju's. He decided to check and saw her with her boyfriend. What he saw stunned him. Juju was screaming, demanding the guy put her down, but he didn't care at all, carrying her on his shoulder like a sack. He even said she was overreacting. Juju desperately punched him with her small hands, insisting on being let go. Then Seungmin saw him throw her into a car as if she were an inanimate object. Seungmin was speechless. I just can't understand why Juju is with someone who treats her like that, and because she can't stay silent. Today, he finally came here to tell her everything, and sincerely express his concern, asking why she is with someone like that. Juju blushed and mumbled that she didn't understand what he was talking about. But right after that, she covered her mouth in shock as she recalled that day, feeling extremely confused and not knowing how to explain. Meanwhile, Seungbin kept telling her how her scream that day made him so worried. He said he intended to rush to help, but the car sped away too fast for him to catch up. Since then, he hasn't stopped wondering if she was safe, and Juju immediately recalled that day. When she and Dojin were heading to the car, she suddenly asked, and he urgently asked if something had happened between him and the girl. In that case, the class president Dojin was stunned and asked back how she knew about it and why she brought it up now. Juju was referring to the time she accidentally overheard a conversation between Dojin and Celteju, her brother, who was teasing his friend, asking when Dojin would dare to make a move on the class president. Juju recalled and blurted out that that day, it was actually her brother who broke Dojin's laptop, causing him to miss the group assignment for the first midterm exam. Dojin lightly adjusted his cap, looking embarrassed, and just replied that it was long ago and there was nothing to worry about anymore. But Juju thought he would be surprised, so she immediately asked if he thought she was jealous, but his serious gaze made her embarrassed. She said she was just joking, yet her mind was now tangled with all sorts of thoughts. She grabbed his shirt, pressing him to ask why he never clearly explained that matter, since he had said she was his first, and he was her first. So what did all those words mean? Or were they just lies? Immediately, Dojin grabbed her hand to stop her sudden anger. He explained that things were not at all as she thought. He said that day he only came to ask the class president for a study guide, but she said she would only help if Dojin agreed to be her boyfriend. And of course, he refused. At that time, he didn't want to get involved with anyone, but the rumor that they were dating spread quickly, even though it was a misunderstanding, and he didn't want anyone to gossip more, so he kept silent. Deep down, he worried Juju would be bothered by that silly matter. Juju blushed and stammered that she wasn't angry, just felt bad because he never told her the truth. While she had believed the rumors all along, Dojin immediately realized she was jealous and smirked, almost unable to hide his satisfied smile. At that moment, he found her irresistibly cute. Juju got even more annoyed and asked why he was smiling. He answered that it was because she was really attractive, then teased her cheerfully, asking if she was so infatuated with him. Dojin was awkwardly embarrassed, and Juju quickly defended herself, saying it was nothing, that she was only with him because of his broad chest. Dojin still joked that hearing that was really heartbreaking, even though he knew she was just joking. Still trembling from being teased, Juju reacted sharply and said he would see if she was joking or not. She challenged that the day his chest shrinks and his beer belly sticks out, she would leave him to find another guy. Dojin's smile suddenly faded. He looked at her seriously with a hint of threat and said it was best not to joke like that anymore. Juju defiantly responded she wasn't joking. He sighed helplessly, then suddenly stood up and carried her on his shoulder. Juju panicked and asked what he was planning to do. Dojin gently patted her cold body and said, "Wait until we get home, and you'll find out what I'll do to you." Back in the present, Juju still hung her head in embarrassment, recalling she thought she had to explain to Seungmin that it was just a silly lover's quarrel that went too far, but then she realized there was no need to explain anything. She frankly said that they weren't close enough for him to ask such questions or meddle in her private matters. Moreover, she questioned why he thought he had the right to ask her like that. His actions scared her, and he shouldn't behave that way. Slowly, Seungmin scratched his head, clearly embarrassed, and mumbled that he just thought something serious was going on, so he wanted to talk, but Juju firmly asserted that there was no closeness between them, and she hoped from now on he wouldn't care about her too much. After saying that, she turned around and quickly walked toward the parking lot, leaving Seungmin standing behind. He froze, feeling guilty, but still didn't understand why she reacted so strongly to his concern. After a while, Juju finally arrived at the parking lot, sat inside the car, and softly apologized for making Dojin wait. Dojin smiled and said it was okay, then asked what had just happened. Juju briefly thought of Sohyun, but she decided not to tell her boyfriend. Juju still clearly remembered their previous conversation when Dojin showed jealousy, and she didn't want to create any more misunderstandings. She quietly fastened her seatbelt and said that today's class ended a bit late. Dojin accepted the explanation, but his smile was forced. After a while, when Juju was reading messages from her friend, she asked him how his day was. He simply replied that it was peaceful. Yet his voice sounded a bit strange. After all, they had been neighbors for many years, and Dojin was also her brother's close friend. Juju understood him very well, from his habits to the little expressions others wouldn't notice. She knew Dojin wasn't impulsive, but when he was sulking, he showed it clearly with his classic 3 signs that were always the same. Furrowed brows, a sigh of impatience, and the habit of playing with the hair on his forehead. Exactly what he was doing at that moment. He thought he was hiding his emotions skillfully, but in reality, he wasn't. Juju quietly observed, trying to guess what was bothering him as they arrived home. Juju went straight to the bathroom while Dojin plopped down on the sofa in front of the TV. Juju's mind was still troubled. Not knowing how to break the tense atmosphere, Juju decided the best way to make peace was to seduce him. She wore his oversized sweatshirt, stepped into the living room with innocent eyes and a coaxing tone. She asked him to help roll up her sleeves because she couldn't do it herself. Slowly, he approached with an unreadable expression and began rolling up her sleeves to make her more comfortable. But disappointingly, his eyebrows remained tightly furrowed. It was strange, but Juju found him cute in that look. Instinctively, she leaned in to kiss him, sat on his lap, and her hand lightly stroked his firm chest. Yet he showed no reaction, only looking at her hand indifferently despite Juju. Showering him with kisses and gentle caresses, Dojin pushed her hand away and turned his face away. Juju was stunned, shocked, and heartbroken. That had never happened between them before. She trembled slightly and asked what he was doing, if he was deliberately ignoring her. Suddenly, Dojin let out a heavy sigh and asked directly if the only thing she liked about him was this firm chest. Juju was surprised. She couldn't believe he was that foolish. And it was even more confusing if that was truly what had obsessed him all this time. She silently looked at him. While Dojin wrapped his arms around her waist, his voice trembling with tension, he said he just wanted to understand why she was with him. If it was only because he had forced her in some way, he apologized. Dojin immediately interrupted to affirm that he had misunderstood everything. She gently ran her hand through his hair and said yes, she liked his body. But that had nothing to do with pressure or coercion. It was genuine feelings. She really liked him. She lifted his face between her 2 hands, smiled softly, teasing him that he was really silly. She was with him because she truly loved him. That confession touched Dojin's heart deeply. But even so, he still wanted to know what else about him she liked besides his body. Juju gently kissed him and replied that at first she was attracted by his physique, but now she was with him because she truly loved him. He didn't need to worry about those things anymore. At that moment, Dojin told her that when she arrived late at the parking lot, he went looking for her and happened to see her talking to that guy. He said when Seo-min asked why she was dating him and she didn't answer, it hurt him. Since then, he began to doubt whether she was with him out of obligation. Juju felt relieved to finally know the reason he had been sulking all the way home. She intended to explain everything, but Dojin just looked at her as if a burden had been lifted after saying what had been gnawing at him all night. Juju gently hugged the back of his head, pulled him closer, and smiled, calling him a brute. But before he could react, she whispered that she loved him for who he was. Then she placed another kiss on his lips. After the kiss, Juju calmly said she was in love with a hopeless, romantic, childish, and extremely bold guy. Then she pulled down the oversized sweatshirt slipping off her shoulder and added that she didn't like guys who couldn't read signals. But anyway, she was mad at him. Dojin immediately picked her up. While walking, he said he would remember next time, and then asked if she liked teasing him that much. First, Juju wrapped her arms around his neck, gently smiled, and replied that yes, she did, and she liked it very much. Second, he carried her into the bedroom, bent down with a mischievous look, threatening that she would pay the price for provoking him. Third, but before he could do anything, Juju suddenly turned and sat fully on him. She smiled boldly and declared that tonight she was the one in control, making Jin quite shocked. Completely surprised by Juju's initiative, she caressed his body seductively and teased, asking if he wanted her to continue. Immediately, Dojin pulled her close and kissed her passionately. For the next developments, please continue reading the story. Meanwhile, on the other side, in the world of London, it was still daytime. Celteju was lying lazily scrolling through news on his phone, when he suddenly got startled seeing a featured post on the school community page. Someone wrote that one of the most handsome guys in the IT department was dating, and the lucky girl was a beauty from the management department. Celteju immediately paid attention. It might be referring to Dojin, but he wanted to know since when his friend had a girlfriend, and why Sao kept it from him without saying a word. Sometimes he even thought about his sister, because Juju also studied in the management department. But then he dismissed that possibility, and told himself maybe Juju introduced some friend to Dojin. This annoyed him because his sister had never introduced any friend to this poor older brother before. Not long after, Dojin was bombarded with a series of messages from Celteju along with the post. His friend insisted that it was definitely Dojin and he would not let this slide. Celteju wanted to know if Juju had introduced his friend to Dojin and why Sao was hiding this love affair from him. He even asked more, if his sister was eating properly. Dojin simply replied that he was the one who made sure Juju ate 3 full meals every day. But Celteju did not give up and continued saying he would feel betrayed if the rumor was true. and his best friend kept it from him. Meanwhile, Dojin quietly looked at Juju, who was sleeping soundly in his bed, exhausted after the intense and fiery reconciliation just now. But he still did not want to reveal the truth to his best friend, so he changed the subject and asked Celteju if he had found a girlfriend in London. After all, Celteju always boasted that just by going there, he would find someone right away. Celteju complained that the teacher lied, because in their curriculum, there wasn't a single girl. The next morning, Juju was still sleeping soundly with steady breathing, occasionally softly calling Dojin's name in her dream. He gently brushed away a few strands of hair from her face and affectionately stroked the cheek of the woman he loved. Looking at Juju, Dojin suddenly realized how deep his feelings had become. His chest warmed seeing her sitting there peacefully, as if completely letting go in that quiet moment. Dojin quickly typed the last message. He told Celteju that they would talk directly when his friend returned. Celteju stared at his phone screen in surprise, wondering if Dojin was hiding something, if Dojin was really dating. Sao still refused to admit it. The next morning, the table was once again set with many delicious dishes. Juju happily thanked Dojin for always putting effort into preparing wonderful breakfasts for her every morning. When she sat down at the table, he casually told her he had just received a message from Celteju. Her brother would return next Friday. Juju froze, realizing they only had one more week. After that, her brother would come back and would definitely go crazy when he found out she and Dojin were dating. In her heart, Juju just wished her brother would be gone for more than 4 weeks. Dojin noticed the worry on her face and asked why she looked so sad. Then Juju sighed and admitted she wished her brother would never come back. Immediately after, she hurriedly corrected herself, saying that sounded terrible, but the truth was, Dojin cooked much better than Celteju. While she said that, he gently used his thumb to brush crumbs off her lips. Second, Dojin smiled and said he was happy to meet her high standards, then jokingly asked if it would be better to just kick Celteju out and move in together. Third, Juju blushed immediately. She couldn't resist whenever he spoke in such a serious and decisive tone. She wanted to know why he was so sure, because if this continued, she feared she wouldn't be able to say no. Dojin laughed happily, enjoying seeing her flustered, then asked what he should do with a girl like her. Right after, he reached out and firmly held her hand on the table. Fingers intertwined, a determined voice asked if she agreed. Juju's heart pounding rapidly, and she firmly replied that of course she agreed, even adding that she couldn't even imagine having to go back to eating food cooked by her brother again, and firmly stated she would definitely live with Dojin, but classes were not yet cancelled, so the two had to go to university together during the professor's lecture. Juju almost couldn't concentrate. News about her brother's upcoming return kept swirling in her mind. Sure, her brother would go crazy knowing she was dating Dojin, but she hoped he would eventually accept it, which made her uneasy, especially whenever Celteju and Dojin were together. They seemed lost in their own world. She feared everything would go back to how it was before. Just imagining her brother, dragging her boyfriend to an internet cafe or anywhere just to play together, was enough to annoy her. Juju sat typing on her laptop, both annoyed and upset, thinking it was time for Celteju to get married and move out to live independently. Only then would he leave her and Dojin alone. But suddenly Juju's face flushed as she briefly wondered if it was too soon for her and Dojin to think about marriage. That thought was cut off when her friend, Dong appeared asking why Juju was still sitting in class when the lesson had ended long ago. Everyone else had already left. Juju embarrassedly replied that she was lost in thought about life and didn't realize it. So Dong immediately seized the opportunity to ask if Juju was free today because she wanted to schedule a coffee date that had been postponed many times. Juju intended to decline, but at that moment a bright idea flashed in her mind. Everything could be easily resolved if Celteju also had a girlfriend. Suddenly Juju asked Sojong if she still wanted to be introduced to her brother. That late afternoon, the two went to a cozy cafe in the area. On the way, Juju called Dojin, telling him she would be back in time for dinner and to not worry, seeing the call. So Rong curiously asked if she was talking to her boyfriend. So Rong nodded in confirmation, then immediately asked if she had just spoken too sweetly, even sounding overly infatuated. So Rong reassured her that it was okay. All couples in the honeymoon phase were like that. But meanwhile, Juju still hesitated about whether she should really introduce her friend to her brother. Deep down, she thought Sodong was too good for Celteju, but surprisingly, Sodong showed interest and asked more about Celteju. Then her friend bluntly asked if Juju was really planning to set her up with her brother. Juju had to admit that she was actually dating her brother's close friend, and was sure that when Celteju found out, he would go crazy. So she thought it would be easier for him to accept if she was also dating someone. But on second thought, Juju felt guilty for trying to turn her friend into a tool. To distract him, she admitted later that it had been too long since the two had a chance to hang out together like this, and Juju apologized for bringing up her brother. At this moment, unexpectedly, the next moment, Sodong slammed her hand on the table, loudly telling Juju to stop. With a determined look, she placed her hand on her chest, enthusiastically declaring that she really wanted to meet Juju's brother, and Juju must introduce them. They promised to do everything to win his heart. Juju was stunned by the unexpected reaction, then said in that case when her brother returned, she would introduce them immediately. She said she was also happy that Sojong really cared about Celteju, but honestly worried her friend was idealizing him too much. She warned that once they met, Sojong blushed and suddenly said it wasn't just about appearances. Actually, there was something she needed to confess to Juju, something that happened a long time ago. She began to tell about the time at university, when rumors arose that Juju and Kim Suwon were dating. Sojong said that at that time, Kim Suwon went around bragging that something had happened between him and Juju. While Juju angrily denied it, even saying she barely talked to him, the group of girlfriends nearby criticized Kim Suwon. And Sojong felt heartbroken because she was the one who started the rumor, thinking Juju liked Kim Suwon and wanted to help the two get together faster. Now she realized the trouble she caused and knew she had to make amends. On the way home, Sorong didn't know how to face her friend. She resolved to apologize to Juju. As soon as everything was settled, she only hoped to be forgiven the next day when Sodong stood face to face with Kim Suwon. She had arranged to meet him to demand that he stop spreading rumors about Juju, to which he replied that Sodong was the one who started everything. But she immediately accused him of lying, saying that he was the one who told Juju he liked her. Kim Suwon arrogantly stepped closer and asked if she had any proof, making Sodong confused. She repeated that he had said it himself, but he firmly denied it, claiming she had no evidence and no one would believe her. Especially since she was the one who had suggested spreading rumors about him, he raised his hand as if to strike and shouted loudly, telling her never to talk to him like that again. The girl trembled, raising her hand to cover her face in fear. Tears welled up, but nothing happened. Then she heard a voice asking if Kim Suwon was done. It was Celteju. Sorong slowly opened her eyes at that moment. She saw Celteju tightly holding Kim Suwon's hand, his gaze darkening and tone firm as he said they needed to talk. While Gudogin confronted the troublemaker, Juju's older brother suddenly appeared beside Sojong and asked if she was okay. Sojong quietly replied that she was fine. Celteju stepped forward and declared that he knew Kim Suwon had approached. Sojong and his friends there had made it clear that this guy was a pervert who stalked girls. Kim Suwon tried to argue, asking what that had to do with him, but Celteju intervened in the unrelated matter, replying that it was directly related, because it involved his sister. At that moment, Dujin didn't hesitate to rush forward and grab the guy's collar. His eyes were cold and crazed, making Kim Suwon visibly terrified. Dujin coldly warned that if he dared to come near Juju again, he would personally make sure he got expelled from university. Meanwhile, Celteju turned to Sodong, who was trembling, and asked if she was okay. The girl, still shocked, replied that she was fine now. Soon after, she couldn't hold back and burst into tears, feeling guilty, especially since it happened right in front of her brother. Celteju's close friend tried to comfort her, thinking he had scared her. He quickly apologized, but Sojong immediately affirmed that it wasn't his fault. Then Sojong choked up and confessed that she was the one who spread the rumor about Juju at school. She had wanted to tell her friend the truth, but was afraid Juju would be angry and never want to see her again. Surprisingly, Celteju didn't get mad. He just laughed and said his sister was really scary whenever she got angry. That's why he and Dojin had to sneak here. If Juju found out, both would definitely be in trouble. He gently wiped Sojong's tears, softly reassured her, then asked her to keep their presence there a secret. Sojong nodded but said she still needed to apologize to Juju. Meanwhile, Dojin was recording Kim Suwon's promise on his phone, making him swear never to come near or talk to Juju again. Celteju smiled charmingly and told Sodong she must be a freshman because she was close to his sister. He added that everyone makes mistakes when they're young and she shouldn't be too hard on herself. He advised her to choose the right time to apologize to Juju because she would definitely understand and forgive her in the end. He told her to always be a loyal friend to Juju. Sodong blushed and nodded. And from that day on, her heart belonged to Celto. After hearing the story from her friend, Juju complained that Celteju was really annoying, always acting like an adult even though he was only a few years older. Sojong worriedly held her cup and said she knew it was late, but still wanted to apologize to Juju for everything. Juju gently reassured her and thanked her for her sincerity and apology. She even admitted Celteju was right. If she had known back then, she wouldn't have been upset or listened to any explanations. But now she wasn't angry anymore because she understood, so Jong just wanted to help her. So Dong felt a burden lifted and hugged Juju, calling her the best friend ever. Juju gently patted her friend's back. Still in that embrace, she suddenly thought of Gudogin and remembered how he didn't let his own problems affect her, but quietly went to confront the troublemaker on her behalf. Then the two girls chatted a bit more before going home together. Juju was eager to hug her lover. As soon as she got home, she hurriedly took off her shoes and ran to him, her heart full of emotion after hearing Sodong's story. Dujin was preparing dinner and was about to say she had once said she wanted to eat tteokbokki, but before he could finish, Juju ran into his arms. She felt she loved him even more. Dojin embraced her, surprised by that reaction, and then told her to be more careful. Juju didn't answer, just held him tighter, then gently placed a kiss on his forehead. He was embarrassed, feeling so much love, and energy was wonderful, but he wanted to know what made her so happy. The girl looked at him with gentle eyes full of affection, then confessed that she just realized how much he truly loved her. He smiled and replied that she already knew that, so he just wanted to understand why at this moment she was so emotional. But Juju asked what if one day she really got angry, then what? First, Jin gently adjusted her in his arms and smiled lightly, saying of course he would try to soothe her and make her happy again. She pressed on asking what if the fault wasn't his, then what? The guy replied that, even so, he would still take responsibility as if it were his fault, but no matter what, he also hoped she wouldn't get upset for no reason. Dojin laughed joyfully, his heart full of emotion amid laughter. She called him silly, and surely he was already infatuated with her indeed. Dojin still didn't understand the reason for that sudden joy, but he was happy to see her radiant and honestly replied yes, he truly loved her. Juju reached out to hold his face, thinking to herself, how could this man be both adorable and dangerous at the same time? Then she pulled him close and kissed him passionately, at the same time silently promising deep in her heart that there would never be a scenario where she lost Dojin unless she passed away herself. Dojin held her tenderly while maintaining the kiss and smiled softly. Juju laughed and asked if he intended to love her forever. When Dojin sat down on the sofa, placing her on his lap, he didn't answer immediately, making her impatient for an answer. At that moment, Dojin suddenly thought of something he had never considered before. This feeling didn't scare him, it was strong and genuine, so he honestly replied that he would love her forever. Deep inside, Juju had always dreamed of hearing those words, although the thought made her a little worried. Driven by emotion, she suddenly asked if they should get married. Dojin's face twitched. Stunned by those words, the beautiful moment was suddenly cut short by a wave of fear. He blinked and asked what she was saying. Seeing that reaction, Juju cautiously asked if something was wrong. Maybe he didn't want to marry her, but Dojin awkwardly quickly said it wasn't like that, he was just surprised. Juju, hurt inside, turned away, telling him to forget the conversation as if it never happened. Immediately she was embarrassed, blaming herself for thinking he would like the idea, but Dojin didn't want to pretend nothing happened. He gently held her hand, explaining that it was just because she suddenly talked about marriage that he was surprised. But Juju was still shy, turning away, replying that he had said he loved her and she loved him too. Moreover, since Juju was about to return, she didn't want her brother to take Dojin away from her, so she thought it would be a good idea. The guy sighed in relief, then said, so that was what she had been worried about all along. He smiled sincerely, telling her not to worry. Even if Celteju returned, he wouldn't leave her. Escaping him wouldn't be that easy. Dojin gently squeezed her hand and softly asked to give him some more time, and in the meantime she should think carefully and decide if she really wanted to marry him. Then still smiling, he pulled her into his arms tightly, saying although Juju was a bit childish, he was very happy to hear those words. Juju pouted, thinking that in her proposal, there was nothing childish at all. She really wanted to marry him. 4 days later, Juju went to the bar to meet So Jong. The two happily clinked their beers excited because they finally had a chance to hang out together. So Jong was surprised to see Juju accept the invitation, even ordering drinks when before she always refused because of a promise made to her boyfriend. Juju with a tense face took a big sip trying to find words, then suddenly confessed that her boyfriend had been ignoring her these past few days. This shocked So Jong, because Juju always insisted that Gudogin couldn't live without her, when Juju admitted that a few days ago she had proposed. So Jong was stunned, then asked if she was too hasty. Although they hadn't been together long, Juju panicked, saying she knew, but those words had forced out. The worst thing was his reaction. Juju continued telling that he thought she was joking and that deeply offended her. She felt he still didn't see her as a woman, but just as a little sister from that conversation, he started avoiding her, and distancing herself. Then Juju bowed her head on the table and cried, saying that before, he never took his eyes off her. But now, as soon as their eyes meet, he quickly looks away. So Rong tries to comfort her, saying maybe she is exaggerating everything. But Juju looks up, her eyes brimming with tears, chokingly asking what she should do now because she feels he is disgusted with her. Smiling, So Rong comments that clearly Juju has no experience in love at all, then suggests she will give her a mischievous hint. So, Rong says, she has heard that some men go crazy for special surprises. She looks at Juju meaningfully, hoping her friend will immediately understand the hint. Then Juju starts thinking and a plan flashes in her mind. The next day, thanks to fast delivery service, a package is sent. When opening the box, So Rong's words ring in her mind again, encouraging and assuring that it will definitely work. Blushing, Juju takes out a small lace fabric. She's not sure if Jin will like it, because she herself has never had experience in this kind of situation. But finally, she decides to just try once. After changing clothes, Juju feels both shy and embarrassed, but tells herself that since it's come to this point, there's no turning back. She looks at the phone on the bed and then decides it's time to call her boyfriend. When he picks up, Juju tries to keep her voice calm, asking where he is, if he's coming home soon, then adds that she's very hungry. At the same time, a few hours earlier, Dojin still can't stop thinking about their recent conversation. He recalls Juju's proposal. His heart pounds. Entering the jewelry store, he asks the staff to show him popular ring models. The salesperson introduces couple rings and engagement rings, asking which type he wants immediately. In his mind appears the image of Juju wearing that ring, a bright smile spreading on his lips. He silently hopes she will like his choice. A bit shy, he points to an engagement ring and says he will take it, asking the staff to hurry the process because he is in a rush. It's a classic model with a small stone in the center, but somehow it immediately catches his eye. The seller praises Dojin's refined taste, making him blush, and awkwardly say that he intends to propose to his girlfriend. The staff smiles meaningfully and asks if he knows his girlfriend's ring size. Dojin scratches his neck hesitantly, admitting that he doesn't know exactly, only that her fingers are very small and slender. He adds that maybe he can guess by feeling. When touching, the seller brings out a set of sample rings to try on. After trying several sizes, Dojin finds a ring that fits her finger perfectly. Looking at the tiny ring, Dojin thinks about how delicate Juju's hands are, feeling like he's buying a toy ring. In his heart, he concludes that he must feed her more. Later, while at the market, Dojin receives a call from Juju asking where he is. He replies that he is shopping, and she is surprised, asking why he went alone. Dojin just adds that he still has some business to take care of, then changes the subject, asking what she wants for dinner. Juju, with a suggestive tone, says that for dinner, all she wants is for him to come home soon. Sighing, he lowers his head, realizing he's been cornered, and promises to come home as soon as possible. A while later, Dojin enters the house, carrying 2 heavy bags, loudly announcing that he's home. Then Juju peeks out from her room, both shy and excited, waiting for his reaction. While he turns his back and starts taking things out of the bag, he says he will cook the spicy chicken dish she liked last time. Juju interrupts softly, calling his name. At the moment, Dojin turns around and looks at the bags in his hand. They fall straight to the floor. Just one look at his girlfriend, and all the air seems to be sucked out. All other thoughts vanish. While Dojin is silently gazing at Juju, she reminds him that she already told him over the phone what she wanted for dinner. Her fingers slowly glide over the buttons of his shirt, her eyes hopeful, telling him to follow her. A moment later, in the bedroom, Dojin smiles with interest, asking what made her prepare such a surprise. Juju blushes, admitting that it's all his fault. These past few days, he clearly avoided her. When she invited him to the movies, he ignored her. When she suggested going out, he also refused, whereas before he always took her everywhere. That made her scared, afraid he was tired of her. Dojin suddenly realizes that he has been so busy preparing for the proposal that he didn't notice her worries. Now looking into Juju's eyes, he understands he hurt her. He apologizes, saying he was too busy, and truly regrets making her feel that way. Then he moves closer, asking if it's true she did all this just because of him. Juju blushed and said she didn't even know if he liked it or not, his lips close to hers whispering that everything started from her. Everything about her was precious to him, and she didn't need to worry. Juju looked at him with admiration, suddenly realizing that all her previous worries were pointless. Standing in front of her, Dojin smiled sincerely, saying she was truly wonderful. Making Juju's heart pound, he bent down to kiss her, and Juju hugged him tightly, pulling him even closer. A while later, Dojin lay back with a happy, excited smile, saying he liked surprises like this very much, even wouldn't mind if she did it every day. Juju replied that it wouldn't be fair if only one side did it, and she also hoped to receive surprises from him. Surprised, Dojin asked if she had thought of anything else. Juju told him to promise not to refuse. Unable to resist, Dojin nodded in agreement and asked what she wanted. Secondly, Juju eagerly said she really wanted to see him wear a men's harness. Just thinking about the image of Dojin wearing that outfit was already unbearable for her. A few days later, a package was delivered to Dojin. He opened it and looked inside, unable to believe he had spent money to buy that. Some items inside he hadn't even ordered. Surely a mistaken delivery. Just then, hearing Juju call him, he was startled and dropped what he was holding. Then Juju poked her head into the room, asking if he would pick up her brother at the airport tomorrow. Dojin just nodded to confirm. Seeing him holding a box, Juju was curious to know what interesting thing was inside. Secondly, Dojin hesitated briefly, quickly pushing the dropped item aside and replied that there was nothing special. Then he tried to pull her out of the room, saying he had asked Celteju to call a taxi because he planned to take her to the movies and spend the whole day together. 3 days later, the car glided through the city at sunset. Dojin sat behind the wheel, thinking to himself whether he had prepared enough, whether he had considered every detail. Seeing Juju sitting pensively, he asked if she was okay, if she felt uncomfortable anywhere. Juju replied she was very worried about Sale. Teju returning tomorrow. Confessing that she felt stressed, she asked if he was worried, and what if her brother decided Dojin wasn't worthy of her and forbade this relationship? Then what? He calmly asked, since when she started worrying about such things, and if Celteju really forbade it. He wanted to know what she would do. Juju, flustered, replied that it wasn't like that, and he knew that, well, was wanting to comfort her. Dojin gently placed his hand on hers, saying although her brother's opinion was very important, he definitely would never let go of her hand. He kissed Juju's hand gently, affirming Celteju would understand everything. And with a mischievous smile, he added, especially when her brother realized Juju couldn't live without this wonderful chest, Dojin. Juju blushed and quickly pulled her hand back, sharply saying if he dared say that in front of Celteju, she would kill him immediately. Dojin laughed excitedly, teasing her to try. Secondly, Juju also laughed, half threatening, half coaxing, telling him at least to stop the car first. A while later, Dojin stood in front of the bathroom mirror, his heart pounding wildly as if it would jump out of his chest. Telling himself everything must go perfectly, he had prepared flowers, rings, even booked a luxurious hotel room in advance. He also set aside a very neat suit just to impress Juju. Meanwhile, Juju glanced around the luxurious hotel room, surprised to know he had rented a whole room. From the bathroom, Dojin explained he had spent a lot of effort tidying up the apartment neatly before Celteju returned, so it would be a crime to mess it up again. Juju fell back onto the bed, feeling a little sad, asking what would happen, whether they would have to pretend nothing had changed in front of her brother. Dojin wanted to know what she meant. Juju's eyes still glued to her phone screen, replied that it was no different than Celteju having 2 homes, spending the day at Dojin's apartment and returning home at night. Dojin asked if that really bothered her. Juju, still lying there, didn't realize he had stepped out of the bathroom, blurting out, wasn't she the only one thinking about how to solve this? Feeling annoyed inside, she thought that was why the idea of marriage suddenly flashed in her mind. She didn't want to continue living separately like that anymore, so Juju half-jokingly said, if so, he could keep sleeping alone every night like before. But then she froze when she caught the sight before her eyes. Dojin looking at her affectionately wearing the suit he had bought just to make her happy, holding a bouquet of fresh flowers. A moment of silence passed before he said he had something important to confess. That recently he had been very afraid to sleep alone without her by his side, despite showing obvious tension. He continued to admit that just the thought of waking up in a world without Juju beside him terrified him to the extreme. Juju was speechless, unable to believe this was really happening. Her heart began pounding, tears of happiness welled up at the corner of her eyes. Dojin knelt before her, his hands trembling as he raised the bouquet, earnestly asking if she would agree to marry him and share this life together. So moved that he fumbled, forgetting to take out the ring immediately. Then he reached into his pocket, finally revealing a small velvet box resting in the palm of his hand. Before he could say